Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with author, speaker, exhorter, overcomer, and believer Kim Gilson. She was born to be a teacher. As far back as she can remember, she played school in her room, teaching dolls and stuffed animals from a chalkboard and holding parent-teacher conferences with those who struggled. As she grew older, the stuffed animals became real students to whom she taught band and then math. As her career in public education blossomed, Kim learned her passion was teaching adults, making difficult topics easier to understand and enjoying laughter in the process. The sudden loss of her husband, Paul, to a blood clot in 2014 sent her on a personal journey of grief and a battle to reclaim joy in her life for her and her sons. We get into her full story. Enjoy.
Well, it's great to meet you. And before we get into your life as an author and a speaker and a believer and everything that makes up who you are, I want to know, 4 years ago, we were all trying to figure out this pandemic, how long it was going to last, the ramifications. So now I'm curious, how did you make it through that time period, and how did it change the way that you do things now?
That's a very interesting question. During the pandemic, I had a pretty big job title, Chief Academic Officer of a charter school district. And I took the job in August of 2019, spring of 2020. We go away for spring break and don't go back, right? And then we had to make that switch to online learning. And with the title Chief Academic Officer, guess who that fell on? And I have a team of about 4 people at that time that led us through that. And then the kids came back from school, and they hadn't learned anything for a couple of years. So we had to come up with these learning loss plans, and the stress of this was a lot. But we had our plans. I felt like we knew what was going on, and then our state legislature came out with some crazy tutoring bill for kids on their state assessment, and that was the nail in the coffin for my career. I looked at that piece of legislation and I went, yeah, this is the straw that's going to break my back. And so 6 months later, I retired. And I now have a retirement gig less than a mile from my house. I'm a curriculum director of a Christian daycare. And so I learned, I think, a lot about what's really important through that situation. I learned about stress and the negative effects it can have on you. And I had come through a rough period of losing my husband, and I had fought to find my joy again. And after that, I went, you know what? This career thing isn't worth it anymore.
So talk to me a little bit about here in 2024 what you're doing for a living. If I put you in front of a bunch of third graders at career day and one of the kids said, hey, what do you do for a living? How do you answer that child?
I would tell them that I get to help little kids learn about Jesus and how to make friends and how to love each other and how to learn things that will help them be successful later in life.
So what did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream to grow up and become?
Well, what's interesting, in my elementary years, there's somewhere a picture I've got to dig out. I wanted to be a hula dancer. And God loved my mother. You know, we didn't have Amazon. We didn't have Walmart. So she goes out and buys like pink crepe paper, and she made me a little hula costume for career day at school. She knew I was never going to be a hula dancer, but you know, let's give props to my mom for really supporting me no matter what I wanted to do.
That's wonderful. You know, it's interesting. I got to say, I'm an IET technician for a large school district. And I've noticed, I think the people that were hurt the most by this absence of in-person were all the kids. And I don't think that attention right now is the spotlight's on that, but so many of these kids got stunted and didn't make it and are still struggling right now because of that.
I totally agree with that, and they got shortchanged in so many ways. And I know in Texas, I was working with state government grants to try to help the learning loss, but they didn't just lose academics. They lost social skills as well during a time in their lives when that is so very important. And I think there's going to have to be great attention on how to recover from that as well. Oh,
I totally agree. So let's go back a little bit to where you were born and raised and how these seeds of education and faith and all of these elements that have evolved into who you are today, how did all of this begin and take hold?
Well, I do not have this really dramatic conversion story. You know, I can't say, oh man, I used to hate Jesus and puppies and apple pie. I mean, and then suddenly I found Jesus and I loved all these things. It was never anything like that. I grew up in a home that was a Christian home, and I had an idyllic childhood. I really did. The teaching thing was very interesting because nobody in my family was an educator, but when I was a little girl, I played school. Every day I would go to school and learn something, and then I would go home that afternoon and I would set up my little stuffed animals and I would teach them what I had learned that day. And I had a little desk, and I would use any extra money to buy office supplies for my desk, and I would have parent-teacher conferences with the stuffed animals. And if anybody at school made me mad, well, I went home that night and I named one of my stuffed animals after them, and I took it out on that poor little teddy bear.
Wow. Wow. So let me ask you this. Who's been an inspiration? Who's been a hero for you in your life?
You know, I would have to say my parents. They are two of the smartest people I've ever met, and they have 0 hours of college to their name. My dad was a computer programmer for the Army and Air Force Exchange Service. He would come home when I was a little girl, and if you've seen the movie Hidden Figures, you know, they had that really huge computer that took up an entire room, and they had these key punch cards that came out. And if you're in IT, you may have seen these. He would come home with those in his pocket. And as computer languages were developed, they would send him to little schools to learn them. And so he would program in COBOL. And the phone would ring in the middle of the night, and out of a dead sleep, you'd hear my dad go, "You got to run a DASD 3/4792J." I mean, it was just amazing. And then my mother, she was a secretary her whole life, but just wisdom and discernment. Those are two things that I value so much, and unconditional love. They are in their mid-80s. They are in incredible health, and still, you know, they call me every week, and they're like, "What can we do to help you this week?" And they truly mean it. They have hearts of servants.
That's wonderful. So I'm curious, if you can meet one person alive on the planet right now that you find interesting or fascinating, who would that be? Who would you love to meet and talk to?
Oh, boy, that's a great question. Let's see. One person who is living. Okay, and I am not saying this because of any political leanings, all right? I would like to talk to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. just about his family and what does he know and what is his perception about his family and their history. Again, it has nothing to do with him as a political candidate, just kind of as someone who was personally invested in those stories. What is his take on all of it?
You know, that's interesting you say that. I remember hearing a Joe Rogan interview with him, and it's been about 4 months ago, and he did get into the effect of, you know, family members dying and just how all of that kind of shaped the way that family dynasty was perceived and all of that. So, yeah, that would be interesting to delve into that because, you know, at the end of the day, when you look at the history of America, the Kennedys are one of the most famous dynasties to ever, you know, be in this country.
Yes, and they're people. You know, they're people with relationships and children and grandchildren, and how do you process all of the many layers that involves?
Absolutely. So let me ask you this. Every day you wake up and you have a job, you're giving, you're helping. What is the stamina? What is the motivation for you to do the job that you do and also hold enough back to evolve as a human being yourself?
Yeah, and I think the whole COVID thing, you know, kind of gave us a perspective of that. And my husband died in 2014 from a blood clot. And what that really taught me is that we all have an expiration date. Nobody knows when they're going to go. Now, it's interesting. My husband told his friends when he was a kid he thought he was going to die young. I fully believe I'm going to be here a long time, but I don't take that for granted. And I have been incredibly blessed in my life. I have seen the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living, and I very much feel a responsibility to steward that. You know, I think about the words, well done, good and faithful servant, and how I want to hear those words someday. And I believe that we hear those words in the context of helping other people hear those words. So that's something that I try to keep a focus on. I've kind of got some ideas in the back of my head of some specific things that I can create and develop to help other people hear those words.
So of all of the jobs and clients that you've had in your life, what's been one of your favorite client success stories?
Wow, let's think about this for a second. Okay, so I did a class at my church on how to help people write their testimonies, to tell their stories of Jesus. And I've written a little workbook, and I give that away for free, and it's something that I've got plans to develop to a greater extent. But there's a lady there who had experienced great trauma in her life, and through the process of us working together to go through and to share her testimony, she uncovered things that she had forgotten about. And what was so amazing is her son was also in the class, and he learned things about his mother and her story that he had never heard before. And she got up, and she's not a public speaker. She got up in front of the church and shared her story and took ownership of things, was able to make some peace with things, and to view herself differently as a survivor, having gone through that, and gave herself more grace and took more pride in the journey that she'd made. And it was really cool to sit back and see her make that progress.
So what's the best advice you've ever gotten in your life?
Oh, boy, that's really good. The best advice I have ever gotten. My parents always told me, going back to the little hula skirt, my parents always taught me, you can do anything you set your mind to. And, through my education career, I was a band director, a math teacher. I was at central office. I worked for a regional education service center. I was a chief academic officer. Now I'm a curriculum director at a Christian day school, a daycare, and I've come out with my first book. And through it all, my parents were there cheering me along the way, no matter what the change looked like. I kind of felt guilty. They paid for a music education degree, and after I had my first son, I became a math teacher because it was more family friendly. And one day I said, Mom, I feel so bad. You paid for this degree. And she said, honey, education is never wasted. Nothing is ever wasted. So that's probably a good little second choice for best advice I've ever been given. Nothing's ever wasted.
Yeah, for sure. So let me ask you this. Of all of the things that you've done, accomplished, and evolved into in your life, what are you the proudest of?
When my husband died in 2014, my kids were 13 and 15. And the night that he died, I laid in bed and I decided that I could not let that be the last day of happiness they ever knew. I couldn't let their lives be a downhill spiral. I couldn't let them look back on that and say, well, that was when our lives fell apart and they were never good again. And so I vowed that I was going to do whatever it took to fight back to joy for me and my boys. I knew if I wanted them to have joy again, I was going to have to show them it was okay, and I was going to have to show them how to do it. So fast forward to March 23rd, 2024. this past spring, I remarried a gentleman I had been dating for several years. He is an older gentleman than me and gets along great with my kids. I mean, and I wanted a church wedding because I wanted to celebrate what God had done in our lives. And it was just simple cake and punch reception. And afterwards, you know, we've cut the cake, and my younger son takes the microphone and he does this speech about how he didn't realize until later in life how hard it was for me and what I sacrificed and what I did and what I gave to give them the lives they have today. And there wasn't a dry eye in the room, okay? I mean, I'm just about a puddle of ooze at what this young man is saying. And my other son picks up the microphone, and I'm thinking, I can't handle any more of this. I don't know what I'm going to do. And he says, and Dawn, thank you for taking our mom antiquing so my brother and I don't have to. And the entire room burst into applause. And I thought, this is it. Right here, this is what I wanted for them. I wanted them to love and appreciate and have gratitude and respect our journey and to come out of that having learned something. And I wanted them to maintain their joy and their laughter and their humor. And it was just this 1-2 punch. And I thought, yeah, this is it. This is one of the most proud moments of my life, the way that my boys have turned out.
That's wonderful. So let me ask you this. Let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into the 18-year-old version of you, and you could give that young version of you a piece of advice based on the life you've lived, the wisdom you've gained over this time. What advice would you impart on that young version of you?
You do not control outcomes. I was an overachiever growing up. I was a straight-A student. I was an all-state clarinet player. I was a drum major of my high school marching band. I was a drum major at the University of North Texas in their marching band. I played in the wind ensemble. I saw things I wanted. I worked hard. I set goals. And I really thought that life was this really cool vending machine. You knew how much money you needed to put in or how much effort or how many resources you needed to put in the machine to get the little candy bar in slot E9. And I really thought that I could control what came out of that vending machine. And it wasn't until later, and it's been a process where I've learned you control inputs. You do not control outcomes. In fact, I wrote a blog about how I think SMART goals are actually kind of stupid and not very biblical. But that's what I would have told that 18-year-old person. You know, don't take it for granted that all these things that are happening to you are solely because of your intelligence and your hard work. There's a lot of other things going along here too.
Yeah, that's ultimate wisdom there for sure. So let's say we get off this call, time machine pulls up in front of your house. You can go anywhere back in the history of human time and see one event with your own eyes. Where are you going to go? What would you love to see?
I would love to see the wedding of Cana. I would love to see Jesus turn that water into wine. I would love to see him dancing. I would love to see the looks on those people's faces. I think that would be just a marvelous scene to go witness firsthand.
So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, colleagues, everyone that reads your book, but ultimately you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I'm a work in progress. There are some areas of my life where I'm really proud of where I've come and where I've grown, but I also see the areas where I need to grow. I think there's some places where I'm really smart. I think there's some places where I just have no clue what's going on. I'm pretty funny. People will tell you I'm pretty funny. The preacher who did our wedding service said that I just bring an energy to the room, and that's something that I always want to continue to do. But I also recognize that, you know, if I feel like I got another 50 years living on this planet, I got another 50 years of things I need to learn. And so I always want to be open to learning. And that's what it's something I want people to see in me is that, yeah, she's never done learning. She's always got a new idea. She's always got a new perception. She's always growing.
So, Kim, if anyone out there wants to delve into your world, get your book, learn more about you, reach out, any of the good business, where's the best place to go?
Well, I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and it's Accelerate with author Kim Gilson. Now, that's kind of a cool word. I made it up. It means activating the excellence in you. It's EXCELLIVATE. And I've also got a website. You can go see some of my videos there, read some of my blogs. I've got a YouTube channel. Still pretty new at this, so we're building it all up, and that's exciting. And I'm growing too. I have learned to embrace Instagram. The Gen Xer in me was a little slow, but I'm really learning to love Instagram.
Yeah, I'm amazed at how big Instagram has become. It used to just kind of be this, just kind of an offshoot thing that people would get involved with, and it's really kind of a storefront for people. So, but yeah, this has been wonderful, Kim. Thank you for your story. It's been very inspirational, very full of so many wonderful bits of wisdom. So I appreciate you taking time out. Best of luck with everything.
Thank you so much for your time, and you have a great 4th of July weekend.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. Our esteemed theme music was composed and produced by the great E.E. Pointer of Kansas City's River Cow Orchestra. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.